Okay,
Ready?
go. Yep.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Oswego County Industrial Development Agency meeting of February 23rd, 2023. And before we begin our meeting, I'm going to ask Kevin LaMontagne to introduce the guests and the staff that are present. And then I'm also going to have board member or secretary Len Schick do a roll call to ensure we have a quorum for our meeting. So Kevin?
Thanks, Gary. So we have some guests on the phone joining us today. We have representatives from RIC Energy, which is the developer behind the 3 solar projects on our agenda today, numbers 4, 5, and 6 on the agenda. So we have Peter McAuliffe, Chris Ross, and Nancy Vlahos. Chris is particularly responsible for Oswego PV project manager, and Nancy is particularly responsible for Volney PV and Volney 2 PV. So they'll be joining, and Peter oversees development at RIC. As far as folks in the room, it's staff. We have Kevin Caracoli, our general counsel, Austin Wheelock, our CEO, and myself. I'm Kevin LaMontagne. I serve as chief financial officer of the agency. That's it. Gary.
Thanks, Kevin. Len?
Okay, Gary Toth,
Present.
Barry Trumbull,
Present.
Chick is present, Tim Stahl.
Yep.
Mark Greco.
Present.
We have 5 present, 2 excused. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll get into the meeting. The first item on the agenda is the minutes of January 25th, 2023. And did everybody get a chance to look at them on the portal? Any questions and comments or concerns? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to, in a second, to accept the minutes as written.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mark Greco, seconded by
I'll second.
Tim Stahl. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are carried. The notice of the meeting was in the Palladium Times on February 11th, 2023. We now on item number 3, the treasurer's report. That was included in the portal.
Also in your packets today.
Huh?
It's also in the packets today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll look for a motion and
I'll
a
move
second. Motion by Len Schick. Do I have a second?
Okay.
Second by Barry Trimble on the treasurer's report. Are there any comments or questions on the treasurer's report? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Now, item number 4, Oswego PV LLC, and I think I'll start, I guess, with Austin,
How do you want to do this?
Why not?
or I don't
So,
care.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
maybe I could give the overview, also
Sure,
you could give
and
the rundown of the
Yep.
public hearing, and then we could ask the folks from RIC to give some comments on the project as well, and then open it, have discussion
Yeah.
along the way.
I do want to read at a certain point the minutes from the hearing of that. I know the IDA board members were provided that in advance, but I do want to read that for the record, so it's out there. But Kevin, if you want to.
Yeah, I'll give a quick overview, refer you to the cost benefit analysis. It's in your packets under number 4. This is I'm going to say fairly typical solar project that we've seen come through. It's a 3 megawatt in the town of Oswego, right behind the town's barn, basically, and the intersections of County Route 20 and 7. Thank you. I was trying to think where we are over there. It's a 22.4 acre development, like within the fence, essentially, on a 78.3 acre parcel. As we know, the RIC development in New York is the developer. See the details of the project. It's basically in line with other projects. It's a 3 megawatt, modestly sized, and they've applied under our standard solar pilot deviation policy, which is $5,000 per megawatt per year with a 2% annual escalator. Requirements for a decommissioning plan and/or bond, which will be worked through with the town for closing. And they've applied for mortgage tax exemption as well as sales tax exemption, as we see many of these solar projects do. So, I think that's that's the basic overview of the project, like many of the others. But maybe now I turn it over to Austin to go through the public hearing. We held the public hearing day before yesterday.
Yeah, it was on
Tuesday.
February 21st at 1:30 p.m. at the town of Oswego Town Hall. Kevin, talked about the financial impact of the project, so I don't need to do that. So I guess I'll just get right into the comments. So I provided a description of the financial assistance for which the project is applied. I also provided the time, date, and location of the agency's meeting, which the financial assistance will be discussed and considered for approval. So you look around, no one is here in the room. other than us, and then the people on the phone from RIC. Wanted to, so the first comments, County Legislator Marie Shad from District 19 had concerns that, she had many concerns, but I'll kind of label them. Project would be located on prime timber property. She also was concerned the project would negatively impact neighboring property values. Third, she was concerned that the company's application was not available for review at the public hearing, which they never are. 4, the project was only benefiting the property owner. 5, the property would potentially be utilizing a taxpayer-funded driveway to access their site. 6, she stated that the original intentions for solar projects were on non-productive properties like brownfields, not for productive property like agriculture and timberland. And then she followed up with a question about the current taxes being generated on the property for the town compared to under the pilot agreement, which I provided them the numbers that you have. Mr. Michael Newpuff, his comments supported the project, comparing it to a previous IDA-assisted solar project on State Route 104 in Scriba. I think it's just over the city line property. I think that's the one we had done earlier this year. He also stated that there was a need for hundreds, if not thousands, of megawatts of renewable energy to eventually replace aging fossil fuel sources of power. He also stated he drove by the proposed project site and it did not seem to be either productive farm or timberland. There was disagreement by those in attendance to the opinion of the value and condition of the proposed site. County Legislator Noel Samuelson from District Number 21, which is the legislator representing the district the project is proposed in, opposes it for the following reasons. Number 1, she stated her constituents did not support the project. There was a petition with 67 to 68 signatures. It was never shown, but there was said that there was a petition opposing the project that was generated in the district. And like I said, it was not available for review. And then there were complaints that ranging from it would ruin backyard view to hurt property values. She also stated she is a realtor by profession and believes that the current normal taxes on the parcel are too low. I explained that the solar farm would be separated from the rest of the property in a courtesy split, and that the remaining property would still be taxed as normal. And this is only discussing the property inside the fence of the solar project. She had concerns that the projects are only feasible due to various federal, state, and local subsidies, which hurt the free market and end up costing the consumer more. That is a paraphrasing of her comments. Let's see. 5, I think there's a little typo in here. 5, local, the only benefits are to the landlord, not the taxpayers. 6 concern was it is not the best and highest use of the land, and that commercial projects should stay in commercial zoned areas, not in residential zones. Mr. Arthur Huff stated he built his home in 1991 in the area due to the rural nature of the area. He supports solar in general, but not in his backyard. In his opinion, solar should be sited on property that can't support higher uses like brownfields. He also had concern that the distribution wires would go by his or his son's property. I stated, due to many of these siting kind of concerns, that the IDA does not have jurisdiction over local land use or project siting, and that the IDA only moves forward with financial assistance to a project if it meets all required local approvals. There was a question that it was not stated, the person did not announce their name. There was a question if the developer looked for other sites other than the proposed project site. I stated that the IDA is not involved with siting solar projects. The IDA is aware that the company RIC is looking at other sites in other communities based on applications filed with the IDA. However, we are only aware of projects that have reached out to the IDA. Mr. Nelson had concerns the project would increase truck traffic through the town of Oswego, which will affect more than just direct neighbors. Legislator Shad then jumped in, stated that water runoff of the site will change dramatically due to removing the trees, and it also stated that the project would generate sound and activities that will scare away wildlife. Mr. Muldoon asked a question about who to go to regarding the reduction of his and his neighbor's property values. He also made comments that no local jobs or other positive impacts would come from the project. Legislator Shad also then commented again that the project would be sold off as soon as completed. Mr. Nelson brought up concerns about what happens after the project is over if there are funds to clean up the project. I responded that every solar project approved by the IDA is also required to have a decommissioning plan that is approved by the town. Mr. Nelson then brought up concerns that if the project is not approved, it may trigger litigation with the town of Oswego. I think that was just, there was no, it was just an opinion, I assume. But I stated that I'm not aware of anything to do with that. However, if the IDA benefits are not approved, the company may seek alternative real property tax exemptions through New York State, which would generate no new taxes for 15 years for the taxing authorities. That is known. And then Mr. Muldoon asked again, who makes the decisions for the IDA? I responded, there is a 7-person board and listed the names of the current IDA board members. And I once again made them aware of the meeting that was taking place today at this time, and that people were welcome to come and make comments at that time if they so choose. No further comments. The hearing ended at 2:05 p.m.
Did you answer some of those questions? I mean, were some of those, I know you rattled off.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of them are related to citing and other things that we have no jurisdiction, or I mean, and I, after about the 5th or 6th of the same sort of question being asked again and again, I said the IDA has no jurisdiction over citing issues. That is a town zoning and a town planning issue, which, as it happens, Kevin is the town attorney and could better get into that. And I can say, from my understanding, is that the project has secured all local town approvals from both planning and zoning. And I guess Kevin could.
Yeah, I mean, they have, I mean, really, it's a town. I mean,
It is, and
it's,
I mean, I can take you through much of this, and I know the representatives are there. Chris Ross attended every meeting, and I think with the exception of one, there may have been a weather-related issue that prevented anybody from the company appearing. But this was a heavily attended couple of public hearings initially between the zoning board and the planning board. The town of Oswego does not. They have zoning out there, but there's no mention of solar or wind, any renewable energy. So it required a use variance application. The use variance application was submitted, and actually, if anybody's familiar, I know Gary's on the planning board, maybe some of you have experience on zoning boards, but there's a certain criteria for adopting a use variance that a community must go through. You have to show that the property is unique and that there's a hardship. You can't use the property for any other allowable use in that zone, or else so that would be required to be shown. You also have to show that it's compatible with the neighborhood. It's not going to be a disruption. Can't be a self-created hardship and things of that nature. There's a general historic criteria. However, when it comes to public utilities, and the courts of the state of New York have indicated that solar and wind projects are public utilities, there's a lesser standard of review for these projects. So, and to put it bluntly, they can just about go anywhere, even in residential zones. That's the state of the law of New York. I mean, that's not a local law, that's not necessarily federal, but the state of New York has declared that these projects are public utilities, and thus the standard of review is much lower. And so based on that, the zoning board made its determination, reviewed it. Both the zoning board and the planning board went through an entire environmental review. This was a type 1 action, so it had the most stringent environmental review. There were at least 3 public hearings, and there was a separate public hearing on the environmental aspects of this, both at the zoning and planning board levels. The zoning board did approve the use variance with certain conditions. All of the comments and all of the public made during our public hearing were addressed by the planning and zoning board. I have an answer for each one of them.
okay.
From traffic safety, there are 2 routes into this property, one off of County Route 20, if you're familiar with that stretch. It's pretty treacherous because it goes downhill Cemetery Road. If you're
Yep.
heading
That's,
north or east, the Cemetery Road's here. The entrance is right on the hill, so it's
Okay.
not a good entrance. That's where National Grid though has its access in for the utility poles.
okay.
The balance of it can go off of County Route 7, which is much flatter. It happens to be on and through the town of Oswego Highway Department's land, right? And so when legislator Schott saying, using public roads for private venture, that was questioned. It is permitted to be done, but the town just can't give it away. It's an easement, and so it has to receive fair market value and consideration for doing that. It has to also adopt a resolution. That resolution is subject to a permissive referendum, which means that if an appropriate number of signatures are gathered on a legally sufficient petition, it can force a vote, a townwide vote, to determine whether the town should grant the easement or not, right? So in the first instance, the town board grants the easement, but it's subject to a 30-day window to see if anybody files a petition.
And where is that status?
So the town board is going to, now that the approvals have occurred at the zoning and planning board, I haven't gotten to the planning board yet, but that's the spoiler alert. They approved it actually earlier this week on Monday night, with a list of about 12 conditions that address each of these concerns that are raised by the public. Next meeting, second Monday or second Tuesday in March, the town board will take up the issue of the easement. They're negotiating with the company now on the level of consideration to be offered. And then if the town board adopts, and they've indicated a likelihood that they will, because it's the safest route into the site, then a 30-day window opens for anyone to file a petition. Now, 67 people have apparently signed a petition. I did the math, and it's all based on New York State law. You have to you have to have the appropriate amount of signatures that equals 5% of the town residents who voted in the last gubernatorial election, not by party or rank, just residents who voted, not overall all the residents of the town, but the residents who voted. When you do that math based on the last, and I've already done it, you get about, I think it's either 94 or 95 signatures are required to force a vote.
Okay.
So it remains to be seen. Apparently they may have 67, but
Yeah.
Did we see the signature,
no, I have not seen anything. And it's not, listen, I'll be very candid, yet there were probably at least 50 people that appeared at the first meeting, which was a joint meeting of the zoning board and planning board, because we wanted the company to present the entire plan to both boards and have everybody around in the meeting hearing the same thing. So there wasn't a lot of, speculation of what this was about, and it was well attended. And a lot of those concerns were raised. The next meeting, I believe there were probably half as many residents that attended, but these were also public hearings. We had a joint public hearing to kick it all off. We had separate public hearings on the ZBA side and a separate hearing on the planning board side, and then we had a separate public hearing just to deal with the environmental issues. And each meeting we had, the numbers dwindled to the point where at one point the only person that attended was Art Huff, and to his credit, during the environmental review, interjected quite a bit and frankly made a lot of good points that the planning and zoning boards took into consideration in making their final determinations. So with respect to the vehicle issues, the strong preference of both boards was to go off of County Route 7 and through the town highway land, as opposed to County Route 20 for those very issues of traffic safety and danger. I mean, the company, and I will say, and I've said this publicly many times, and I'm not puffing them. It's just I've reviewed a lot of these as we all have around the table. This is the most complete application I have seen a solar company submit to any municipality for any project. It was very complete, and it was very neat. It presented a 3-ring binder. The town made the entire packet available over close to probably 200 pages of documentation. Made it available on its website from nearly day one. It's on there now, you can still access it. So the fact that anybody's complaining that they didn't have a copy or didn't have access to it, it's just, unfortunately, it was there and it's available.
Well, I think, you know, from my perspective, the only thing that we can deal with is the application. Number
Yeah.
one, I mean, all these other things are really town, zoning board, planning board related, not something that we need to deal with. Although the only, on the converse of that, I mean, if it doesn't get approved, then,
We can't close.
yeah, this is not, we're not gonna be able to continue on.
Well, true.
With that.
Yeah, a couple of other things though. I mean, the thought that this is only benefiting the property owner, I mean, I think that's a bit of a disingenuous statement to make and to rely on, because clearly the property owner enters into a lease, it's a long-term lease, and they get a payment annually for that money, but or for the use of their property. But the very benefit that we're talking about right now, the payment in lieu of taxes, is a benefit to the community.
Correct.
And it's generally substantially more than what the property yields in real property taxes. Now, this particular property is all connected, the residence that this is on, and it's a matter of public record, it's Jack and Connie Simmons' property. It does generate, I think, around $15,000 in taxes annually. Right, because their residence is on it, but as Kevin pointed out,
Yeah.
If this project is approved, there will be a separate, detached by a assessor's, assigning a new subparcel to it.
Yeah.
It'll be attached from the main residence and will be separately assessed.
Sure.
And then the pilot will go into effect. So truly, with a 3 megawatt project, that's $15,000 annually, increasing by 2% over the course of a 20-year period. It's going to generate actually double the amount of tax revenue to the taxing jurisdictions than it currently does.
Yeah.
Or roughly.
Well, from a financial standpoint, I mean, they don't realize that if they just went to the state, it would be zero taxes.
Well, it was mentioned, and I suppose one of the benefits of my participation in the public hearings is I was able to at least explain that some of the benefits and benefits under 487 in the real property tax law to the solar and wind companies. If they just chose to do this project, they get a 15-year exemption, no taxes paid at all. So, that there was a considerable amount of concern and discussion related to the clear cutting of the woodlands there, and it is true. They're going to be cutting probably close to 20 plus or minus acres of wooded area. This received an extensive review by the DEC, by FEMA. There are some wetlands on the property that was taken into consideration. This is not in a flood hazard zone. We put the question directly to the DEC, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife was involved in this. They all determined that there was no adverse impact, according to their jurisdictional oversight, should this project be sited at this location. I try to deal with facts as opposed to speculation, and I mean, these boards did a significant amount of research and took the requisite hard look under the seeker requirements to make their determinations. And these were not unanimous decisions, by the way. The use variance was approved by a vote of 3 in favor and 2 opposed. It passed. And the site plan and special permit on Monday night was 5 in favor and 1 opposed, or maybe it was 6 and 1. Well, I can't recall if there was an absence, but in any event, there was a dissenting vote, which happened to be the chairman of the board, which doesn't happen much. I mean, usually the chairman votes a certain way, but that's how it worked out. So, I don't know, to me, it went through the local approvals, the issues that have been addressed by the property owners around it. One other thing, because there was some concern about you're gonna be able to see the project and we don't wanna look out our backyard, and I think the company did a pretty decent job of selecting the site in terms of keeping the forest land around it and creating a pretty good visual screening and buffering. And those areas that there are gaps, they've got a landscaping plan where they're going to be putting in, dozens of conifer trees and that will help to shield it. And they've agreed to, as part of that maintenance plan, to replace them. If they die off, they have to replace them for the length of the project. Decommissioning was talked about, and there is a decommissioning plan that's being worked on, so that's not an issue. And I guess a little bit of a twist to that is that decommissioning plan will be reviewed every roughly 5 to 7 years to determine if the cost of the bond is keeping up with the cost of decommissioning. And if it isn't, then they have to increase that bond.
Good. Yeah, we had talked about that,
Yeah.
having something like that in our policy. Yeah.
Couple
Yeah,
questions. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Carry on.
No, I just had one to talk. Austin, all the letters were sent to the appropriate
Everything
taxing
was sent,
jurisdictions.
yeah, everything
school
was
board
sent,
members.
according to our requirements of we have to send to with the appropriate time that's needed
And
to.
we received,
We've
returns.
received no negative comments or comments back about it, to my knowledge.
we received the receipts
Yeah,
back,
yeah,
so
certified, yeah.
they all were signed and sent back, and no negative comments regarding the project. Okay,
Not from the taxing authorities.
okay. I just got a few comments I'm gonna talk about later. Mark?
No, you can finish, I'll go after you.
Well, I watched the public hearing, and I think Austin did a very good job, because there was quite a few comments made. One that really struck me was they were talking about the use of non-union labor there, and they use a derogatory term as far as describing the non-union people that are gonna be working on the site, which kind of upset me a little bit, because that's not part of our vocabulary anymore. For 20-25 years, we've eliminated that word, and I'm not even gonna say it. It was uttered 3 times at the meeting. And our job as an organization is to organize the union work, or the people working on site. If they're non-union, organize a contractor. The people working on site, our mission is to try to make them union and try to organize the contractor. And that's it. And if we use these derogatory words that were used at this meeting, it just hinders our, efforts to fulfill our mission. So I wanted to get that out there and clarify that, the building trades all have basically stopped, and thankfully so, using derogatory terms towards individual workers and contractors.
You're speaking from the business trade section.
Not the IDA.
I
Yeah,
just wanted-
just
you
clarify
didn't
that.
clarify that.
This-
You
the
didn't
hat
clarify it.
or-
I
I'm
just wanted
sorry,
to clarify that
this
for
was
you.
This was from watching the public hearing. And so I wanted to make sure that was out there. And the second thing is, they were saying non-union workers from all over, not non-union, but that term again, from all over, south, wherever, are gonna be working on site. As of April 22nd, 2022, and I gotta get the legislation, I just talked to a gentleman yesterday about it, but any application to the state for solar farms, for community solar over 1 megawatt, has to fall under a project labor agreement. So from any application after 2022, April 2022, a project labor agreement has to be part of the building agreement. So we're gonna see more tradesmen on there. And just to throw it out there again, we've had 30 carpenters working on various solar farms, not just here, but just in the North Country too. So it's, it's our job to get on those sites. And that was one of the concerns of the public hearing, was having non-union or people from out of state working on those projects.
Kevin, I talked to Noelle last night about, you know, the emails that get sent out and things like that, and I understand where she's coming from. And, you know, it's a precarious situation where, you know, if you live there and you didn't want to look at this thing, you don't have control. I mean, I'm in agreement that people have a right to do with their property what they will, you know, so long as they pay for it. They've been paying the taxes on it for as long as they've owned it. It's their land, they should be able to do what they want. But of course, we live in a community where towns and villages and people should have a say in, you know, what they dump in their backyard. You wouldn't want a landfill going in your backyard. Maybe some people don't want a solar plant. From an IDA perspective, I mean, we have to pass this. I know I've spoken to the town supervisor as I was walking in here today, and therefore he seems to think he's got enough support. But I would venture to say, and again, forgive my naivety here, but this naivety and experience, but perhaps can we cut back on making these such a beneficial deal to these companies in the sense of why do we need to give them a mortgage tax exemption and a sales tax exemption? I'm just asking this out loud. Do we have to do that? Because if they're going to, you're saying we can't stop these companies from coming in, basically, right, on a utility basis under that guise in the state. I'm just saying, is the state and these corporations that aren't going to be in existence probably before this project is even completed, it'll be under new ownership, right? Should they be able to force their will on a residential community? I guess that's what I'm getting at. I mean, I'm for passing this because if we don't pass this, we're not going to get anything, right? So, maybe you can answer that question.
Yeah,
'cause
no,
I'm kind of conflicted here.
I know, it's a good question, it's a good, you know, a good debate to have, because it really, it highlights, at least from my perspective, you know, the state's push for climate goals and achieving those climate goals under a certain period of time. States made a concerted decision to allow these utilities to go up. The state courts have indicated that they are a necessity, right? They're a public necessity, and therefore can be cited virtually anywhere as long as the impact to the community is minimal and the need is shown. And again, the courts have reasoned that because they're public utilities, there is a need. Everyone needs electricity, right? And that by their very nature, whether you're talking about a solar farm, a windmill, or a transfer station and overhead lines, they're running, you know, through a neighborhood. There is a degree of hardship that the community has to endure because there is a public necessity. Now that's the law. I mean, that's not a town of Oswego decision or rule. I mean, there's very few things that the local community can do, and that's why I push and did push here that you need to look at minimizing that impact. How do you do that? You do that through visual screening, making sure that, you know, nobody wants to necessarily look out their window and see it. We did have a few comments though from residents who said, I have no problem looking out my window and seeing these panels. I think they're great. It means, you know,
Were they really residents, or were they?
No, they were.
Plans from the company.
No. They were truly residents, and I know them. And you know, and I say this with all sincerity. They're a little crunchy. You know, they're a little green. You know, and God love them, but that's them. But it highlights the concern of the state saying we need this, and the local community saying, yeah, but we have to live with it. Right, and so how do you marry the two to minimize the impact? And I think it comes down to, you know, ideally location. These were not necessarily first intended for brownfields and dumps. That only came into effect within the last 5 years, where the state said, hey, if you're going to put these on a brownfield or on the site of a dump, you don't have to go through an environmental review. It's a type 2 action. It's just simple, just put it on there. As opposed to if you're going to put it in a neighborhood, or you know, there's certain sensitive areas around it, we want you to really take a hard look, community, and make sure that where it's being sited, it's not going to endanger the environment. The other thing, and this isn't specific to RIC, it's any solar company. There are truly a finite number of locations within any community or county where these projects can be sited, because they have to be sited near transfer stations in
Grid.
the grid, right? So
Substations, yeah.
in this case, it's a community solar project. This connects directly to the local grid, the overhead lines, as opposed to a much larger project, say 25 plus megawatts. That's going to connect right into,
Transmission.
the transmission lines, right? So there's the companies do a significant amount of research on how close they can get to the transmission source, right? The closer they are, the more beneficial and less costly it might be for them. Is there a sufficient amount of land around that can be cleared or is clear to invite the sunlight in to produce the electricity? And how many residents are around, and how do we minimize the impact on them? And so all of that's taken into consideration. When you boil it down, in the town of Oswego, there are only roughly, and I this did come from the company, but I think it wasn't challenged, and I do think it's a correct statement that, in the entire vastness of that is the town of Oswego, about 1% of the land is suitable to put a solar project on. So that really minimizes of this size or anything larger, right? So it really does minimize where you can put these things. This particular location happened to be, the intersection of 7 and 20, because the transmission connection is literally across the street off of Cemetery Road.
Mark, I want to address the financial question you brought up in terms
Please.
of,
Thank
do we need to, is it an all or nothing, or how does that work? So in the past, there's been precedent before for a solar project in the town of Richland where specifically based on comments and concerns from the taxing authorities, the IDA looked to limit the length of a pilot from a 20-year to a 15-year pilot. This is not a case where any concerns have been brought by the taxing authorities. I would say indirectly, two county legislators came and voiced concerns, but there was no concern brought directly by the county as the taxing authority. There was no concerns brought by the school district as a taxing authority, and no concerns brought by the town of Oswego as a taxing authority. So in the cases before where we've looked to limit because it's directly related to the comments of a taxing authority, that has not happened in this case. The concerns have been brought by residents.
So, and more directly to your point though, in terms of the mortgage tax exemption, sales tax exemption, those are benefits that are afforded to any company applying for benefits through state law.
Are they
I mean, that-
automatic?
If
They're
you,
available, but are
if-
they automatic?
if you qualify, you're entitled to receive them.
Okay.
I'm not aware of a project that this board has entertained where they gave a pilot, but they denied a
Sales.
sales.
Not one that was asked for. Not one that was asked for. Now they have to determine. They have to tell us the value of the project that is subject to sales tax, and they cannot exceed that value in terms of the benefit. But that's how that.
If they were not to go through the IDA board and they went right to the state,
Yeah.
would they get the mortgage tax benefit?
I don't believe they would get a mortgage. I'm not aware of any other
The only
exemption.
just
that's
the only thing they would
available.
get is no taxes.
Zero property taxes for 15
That would be
years.
it. Okay.
Yeah, and there might be a sales tax break on.
I was
I'm not
just-
sure. I mean, there is for manufacturing equipment. I don't know if this constitutes that.
I was just curious.
The other concern, though, too.
There are some components that are tax exempt.
Yeah.
By the nature of what they are, like solar panels are tax exempt in New York State, but a lot goes into the plant, fencing,
Yeah.
the
Gravel.
stands maybe, other parts and pieces, some of the electronic equipment.
The other thing, even if so a community can choose to opt out of the exemptions under 487, and if they do that, then that forces the company to go directly to the taxing jurisdiction to essentially negotiate a pilot. It boils down to that, right? But that exemption, if the town, the county, and the school district don't all opt out, then you have a situation where the town's opted out, but the school district hasn't, or the school district has opted out and the town hasn't. That's the case up in Richland,
right now.
where that happened, and so now you've got this disparity going.
How do you issue a tax bill?
It's, yeah, it can create some problems.
Okay. Right.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah,
but-
I'm just, the pilot is just worth a little bit more than what we're giving away in sales and mortgage tax. I mean, over the course of 20 years, I mean, if you multiply that, it's like 360 something thousand, whereas we're given 278,000-ish in
Mortgage and sales.
sales tax exemptions. So I would ask what the benefit is in the long run, right? Really, what are we doing if we're not getting the taxes? But if that's already set in stone that they're entitled to these things, then obviously, and again, I'm new at this, so I'm just
Yeah.
trying to educate
If they
myself
apply,
on this.
right?
Yeah, that's the other thing. I mean,
They have to apply.
they have to apply. They have to take it. I mean, if you know, a lot of these companies get financing through private equity and others that they're not taking out a mortgage, so if they don't use the benefit, they don't get it.
Just to clarify, I'm okay with approving this, but I would ask, you know, overall, what's the benefit to the community, the town, the school district if we're only getting a little bit more? And then, you know, we talk about energy use, I understand that, but from what I understand, we produce enough energy here, we can't get it out of the county, we don't have enough transmission lines. So where then is the need, you know? It makes sense.
I mean, this, no, I'm not an engineer.
Yeah,
The electricity is
again,
used locally because it goes into the distribution network, not the transmission network, but that's
I
all
get
kind
what
of
you're
electrons
saying. I
flying
get what
around,
you're
so it's,
That's
you
a
know.
different conversation.
Well,
I'm
and
sorry I brought it up. but
No,
it's
no,
just-
but it highlights a larger conversation, and some of these comments, you know, are directed at Albany, frankly.
Oh, I understand, yeah, no, I get that.
More than here, but that's, I
I'm
mean,
just
my,
trying to grasp the big picture here.
yeah, I get, from my perspective from a municipal attorney is to ensure that the project minimally impacts the community. And I think this one has done a pretty good job of at least doing that.
And Kevin and I and Nick, for 2 years, worked on the plants, keeping the plants open.
Yeah.
There's still uncertainty with those plants. There's uncertainty with fossil fuel generation plants. So I guess the solar, wind, and the renewables are basically starting to be put in place to hopefully supplement whatever we lose on the other end. So they have a 25-year lifespan. In 10 years, who knows what the technology is going to be. So it's basically setting things up to supplant it. The people who subscribe to the community solar get a savings on the power they use. So I mean, that's a plus. The taxes obviously is something that they wouldn't have had, without the solar farm. And you balance that out pretty well, but the property that's being built on now is still gonna be paying monies on the home and the remaining property in addition to the taxes being paid on the solar farm. So is it game changing? No, but I think it's stepping in the right direction.
So I think, and I appreciate Mark's questions here, and I understand that we as an IDA board have, I think, a different question before us here. I think Kevin's done a great job of explaining the town, and I agree. I think at this point, it is just a vote. I think we do need to vote in favor of this, but the bigger picture question is appropriate, and I think the more we start to see towns and villages, residents getting frustrated with this, because you just said 1% of that community can have one of these. Anytime we have 1% of somebody getting something, the other 99% is often not, or at least not to the point where they feel it's fair. And the more we see this in communities, the more we're going to get the push for the opt-out. We're going to push for this green energy. And talking about this supplanting or taking over for nuclear if that ever ends. I mean, the reality is, with only 1% of the town of Oswego appropriate for this, it's not gonna work, right? There's certain areas where it could, and certain areas where it couldn't. I think we do need to have a conversation as a county, and this is my legislator hat on. What does this look like? What do we want this to look like? You know, we can't be knocking down 40 acres of chop for these, and we haven't been. I mean, most of these have not had, you know, that large of a disturbance of trees, right? If we're doing about 10 of these a year, maybe somewhere around that range, you know, the next 20 years, that's a lot of acres of solar panels. And a lot of that, and I know in talking to legislator Beckwith or Samuelson, the issue was, you know, what if we need those acres down the road? What if, you know, farming has, the point is we don't know what it looks like, and we're putting 20 years worth of panels on here with a lot of question marks. And especially in this one specifically, yes, there's an increase in taxes in town of Oswego. I get it, $18,000, that's great, but that's a drop in the bucket. That's not going to change anybody's tax bill, right? Let's be real. You got 1% of the town of Oswego that can have these. It's not going to change anybody's tax bill. So I think we just need to overall see. I get that our you know, the guns to our head that, you know, we live in New York State and they require a certain favorable treatment of these organizations, and I understand why. But I do think that the more folks get upset by this, we're going to start to see pushback on that. I think we have to have a better plan.
And just to add on to that, so as Kevin said, the town of Oswego has nothing in their zoning or planning about solar panels. And I know the town of Alney, because we have one of those coming up here, we were at a meeting for that, and just to say, the town of Alney recently passed a moratorium, 6-month moratorium for new applications for solar projects, so that they can get a better handle and look at their rules and see if they need to rewrite them. I mean, I would say if towns have issues with it, that should how it should be addressed. They should go and try to rewrite or do these things so that they do have some more control. I mean, it's not going to be complete control, but it gives them a better handle in terms of controlling where these projects are, so it's going to minimize the impact to the public.
And it's happening. I mean, the municipal clients that I represent, or I'm aware of, many of them either have adopted regulations or are in the process of doing that, including the town of Oswego. So yeah, it's here. It's not going away anytime soon. In fact, I think it's here to stay. I am frankly encouraged. Gary mentioned the work on the nuclear plant. I think I circulated this to the group. But for the first time ever, the state of New York has now officially recognized nuclear power as a source of clean energy.
Yeah.
As Gary can attest, 6-7 years ago, you couldn't find the word nuclear, literally the word nuclear, not even in the negative context, in the state's official energy plan, and now it's a component, and actually a significant component of it. So.
Do we have any comments from the people on the phone from RAC who would like to make any comments here, or before we move to, if there's any, I don't know if there's any other comments from the board, but before we take votes on the individual resolutions, but I just want to give you guys a chance to make a comment.
This is Chris from RIC. I do have just one comment that I wanted to clarify, something that Kevin had mentioned, that less than or around 1% of the total land in the town of Oswego could accommodate solar farms. And that number, just want to clarify where that came from. National Grid has a tool for citing solar projects called the Hosting Capacity Map, where they list the capacity of the substation in National Grid territory, and then the feeder ratings, which are the thermal limitations to how many megawatts can connect. And what we did was look at the two feeders that run through the town of Oswego, one of them which comes down from the city of Oswego down 104 to County Route 20, and then there's another one that shoots south from the city down 7 and across 20, and then down 104 towards Hannibal. And combined, we took the amount of megawatts that can connect to that, I believe it was around 20, and then looked at the general ratio of the amount of acres it would take to build 20 megawatts of solar, and that amounts to around 1% of the total acreage of the town. Now, that's assuming that all those projects can be connected and that the capacity of the substation isn't hit first. If that happens, then it doesn't matter whether or not there's capacity on the line. And the Paloma substation does have feeders that extend into Minetto, and Describa, all the way down into Valmy. So there's the possibility that that's met first. And then, that's with regards to these being the proliferation of solar everywhere, there's the limit on the feeders probably be a few more of these proposed, but eventually, once Paloma hits its cap, that's it for the distribution network.
Paloma Station.
So it's like a space race to get the good spots first.
Yeah, it's a race in this business. It's a race to get into the interconnection queue to get your capacity reserved and try and develop a project. And as Kevin had mentioned, the siting of these is quite challenging. We need to be close enough to the grid where we can connect at a reasonable cost. We have to make sure we identify sites that are large enough to accommodate these projects, but also don't have a number of environmental constraints. But then also, really the deciding factor is when we engage, we can identify great sites, but if the landowner isn't interested in either leasing or selling a portion or all of the property to us, there's no project. So, the question came up a lot in the public hearings. Well, why this location? Well, we campaigned throughout the town of Oswego, and the Simmons were the only folks that had a suitable site that were interested, and that's how we got here. So there's a lot that just to get to the point where we have a site control agreement in place is a huge process, and it takes a lot of time, and that's how we got where we are.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, any more comments from the board? Questions? Did our guests from RIC have any more information they wanted to share with us? Okay,
It's just specific to us. We
So
go.
we're gonna.
This
we're
is
gonna
specific
approve
to
this.
Oswego, and we're gonna do the two
We're
volumes
gonna
after.
approve this without, not being contingent on, town approval. They don't have all the town approval, right?
Well, they do, no,
Well,
so
yeah,
let me
listen.
clarify, I'm sorry, Chris, let me just clarify that. They do have an access in, it would be through County Route 20, and the town addressed that and said, if we go through if the company must go through County Route 20,
Okay.
they have to file a traffic safety plan.
Okay,
But the town's clear preference is to go through the highway land.
gotcha.
So they have access and it's approved in
Okay,
that regard.
alright,
But
okay.
there are those two different contingencies.
so the zoning board, the planning board, both have given final approval for these projects?
They have, yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
can I ask on what is the date of the permissive referendum would expire? Because would we need to give this approval with that understanding?
No, because again, that is only, if it happens, that is only for access through the town garage.
Doesn't change
If
it.
it fails or, something happens, it doesn't occur,
Understood.
they can go through County Route 20. There's no prohibition against it, it's just not the safest.
That's a horrible
way.
spot. I can't even
Yeah,
imagine how.
Right, but
I drove by there the day before yesterday looking at it. I
Yeah,
don't
but it's
even know
not
where
that
they
there's
could
gonna
be.
be constant traffic in and out.
and really,
Once
yeah,
construction's done.
you gotta, yes,
You got a
gotta,
truck, dump truck
once a
coming
week,
out there,
someone
a big
going there to
truck,
mow.
come over that hill, you can't see anything.
you gotta put it in perspective. There's a construction period that's, heavy, in and out will be probably, 2 to 4 months of that. The rest of it is really just, and then, weekly deliveries.
So the referendum's not on anything other than the access to the town.
Yes,
board.
correct.
Okay, understood.
Yep.
And for the record, I represent the opposite side of the street, and I haven't heard from any of my constituents at all from across the street.
Okay.
Regarding this, so.
You're on the other side of County Route 7? Yeah.
I don't know the other
East
side
side
of County Route
East
20,
side,
and I
yeah.
don't either, so.
Small world.
Okay,
It's like an intersection of all representation right
Are you
now.
just north of 20, Tim? Is that where you're?
Yeah, all four of us, pretty much all four of us are clicks.
It's kind of funny, it's such a small world, it all.
You ever meet right on the corner? Discuss
It's
matters.
the heartbeat of Oswego.
I'd say 7 and 20 is literally 3 legislators come up, and then mine
Wow, I
ends
never
right at
noticed that
cemetery.
map.
This project is ground zero for.
Okay, so any other comments or questions on Oswego LLC? Okay, I guess we'll act on the resolutions now. The first one is a seeker resolution. Do I have a motion and a second on the seeker?
I'll move it, and I have a question.
Motion by Barry Trimble, seconded by
I'll second it.
Len Schick. Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, the declaration, this was a phase 1, so we're confident we're following somebody's.
Yep, it's a type 1 action. It received a full environmental assessment review. And a negative declaration was issued and was
It was,
published,
but
yes.
eventually-
It was issued and it's been published in the environmental notice bulletin for the state of New York, so it's all, everything is all set there.
Thank you.
So, yeah, in terms of the seeker resolution, the way it's termed, you are adopting the findings of the local jurisdiction.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, do I have, we got a motion and a second on the seeker resolution. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeker's passed. Now, next on the, is the inducement resolution. Could I get a motion and a second on the inducement resolution, please?
I'll make it.
I'll
Motion
second.
by Tim Stahl, seconded by Mark Greco. Any questions or comments on the inducement resolution? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Inducement is carried. The pilot resolution, can I get a motion and a second on the pilot
I'll
resolution?
move it.
I'll second.
Motion by Len Chick, seconded by Barry Trimble. Are there any questions or comments on the pilot resolution? Okay, hearing none, can I get all those in favor on the pilot resolution, please?
Aye.
All those opposed? Pilot is carried. And the final approving resolution, can I get a motion and a second on the final approving resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mark Greco, seconded by Tim Stahl. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, Oswego PV LLC is done. And Peter, Chris, Nancy, thank you very much for attending
They're
our.
gonna stay on.
Oh, they're gonna stay on?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, because they got the next two.
Yeah.
And I don't anticipate that these ones will take as long, so.
I'll give an overview as we did before. Talk a little bit about the public hearing, which I attended together with Austin, and then turn it over to the folks from RIC to give some comments. So I think it would be most efficient to kind of, these are two separate distinct projects that will be on separate parcels, but I want to give the overview a little bit consolidated because they're right next to each other and there's a merger and subdivision of parcels involved. So these two projects are both located in the town of Valmy on Maple Avenue. In front of me. Which is just over the line from the city of Fulton, right across the tracks from the land that Cayuga County owns. It goes kind of down the hill from Cayuga Community College. They own 40 or so acres between the community college and the tracks. And then this land is on Maple Avenue, just north of, or sort of east of 41 and then south of Maple Ave. That runs there kind of parallel to 41 at that point. So that's where we are with these two projects. Again, they're separate projects, separate approvals, but very related. The Volney 1, so to speak, or Volney PV LLC is a 5 megawatt project. Volney 2 is 4.85. You can see the acreage on the cost benefit analysis for both. It's about 35 acre development for Volney PV and about 30 for Volney 2 PV. What is happening with the acreage or with the sites is these are three commonly owned parcels that'll be merged and then subdivided into two, like east-west basically, or north-east-west. And Volney PV will be on the left-hand or west side, and Volney 2 will be on the right-hand or the east side, both south of Maple Avenue. So,
What's the reason having two?
well, since the total megawatts that RIC was able to take advantage of with National Grid, like kind of referencing the discussion before, they got a total of 9.85, but by splitting it to 5 megawatts or less, they're eligible for the various state programs. They become they're community solar projects by definition. And
They have to define
we've
large
seen this.
scale.
No.
Right, we've seen this before, one time in particular in Richland with another developer where there's kind of a north and south project that are.
OIA.
Yeah. Sounding, but,
Oh,
yeah.
Is
So
it
you can
25?
see the costs of both projects, which are more or less in line with what we've seen before, and like the project we just discussed, they're applying under our standard programs, 5,000 megawatts, so. We have, between these two projects, about $60,000 average annual pilot payments, per year, so.
And just to add on to this, we did hold a public hearing the same day on February 21st. I don't need to read a counting of the minutes from that one because they're pretty sparse in terms of the actual comments, but they were attended by the town supervisor, Greg Hartranft, the deputy supervisor, Gary Sinnard, Brian Sturgis from IBEW, as well as Nancy Blahos from RIC and Kevin and I. And really the only comment that was made at those meetings was brought up by Brian Sturgis with IBEW just as a comment about that the projects are not using local labor in the construction of the projects. It wasn't necessarily it was more just make it on record that the projects are not using
The
local labor.
VAW has gone to these job sites and tracked, which contractors have the jobs and where the people are coming from and so on.
Mhm.
But I think it could be based on the law we've learned about today that's in place. Perhaps
That will
Brian's not aware of
change,
that.
yeah.
So Brian's interested in meeting with the board at some point to just talk about the idea of using local labor on solar projects specifically and share what he has found by his boots on the ground surveys. So
Yeah.
we may take him up on that at some point, but we want to look into this law as well and bring that to his attention.
But other than that,
we support local labor, right? I mean, that's something that
Yeah.
we should get
If there's
behind.
so that's like I said, but just for
And if you can find any.
He was not against.
I'm you, I don't care nobody.
By the way, he was not against the project or necessarily pushing for union labor. It just
more local labor,
I
just
know how that game goes, but
Yep.
So this
he's
one has
looking for
complete
local
town
labor.
support.
there was no issues from the town at all. I mean, actually, we wanted to clarify because the town, it was funny, the town last week on the 16th approved a moratorium for 6 months for solar projects, and we asked them to clarify that this does not impact these two projects in particular, and the town supervisor and deputy supervisor to our face said, no, this is not meant to impact these, it's for ones that come in the future so that we can try to, get a better handle on what's going on.
The language in the local law that wasn't
Well,
quite clear, because it said application.
You're not their attorney?
No,
Oh,
no, but I because of these projects, I
Sure.
had a legitimate question, because it says, new applications or issuance of building permits or certificates
Oh,
of
yeah, right.
occupancy of things of that nature, so,
that
you know,
will
this
apply.
is in the hopper and have been approved, but nothing's been constructed, so if they go to get a building permit, are they gonna be allowed to do that?
Understood.
And so
Yeah.
apparently the town has said
Yeah.
that
we've
the
had
law
several-
does not, the moratorium does not affect these two projects.
Mhm. It wasn't meant to affect these two projects, is what they said. So we don't believe it's going to impact these projects at all.
Well, it shouldn't affect the pilot.
This is Nancy from RIC. This morning I got a letter from the planning board chairman, and I forwarded to Kevin. So you probably got it while we were on this call, but we do have in writing that these two projects are exempt from the moratorium.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yep.
Great. So that, and so like I said, I just wanted to make transparent of what transpired at the public hearing. It's good for your guys' information to know good, bad, if what's happening, at those. And like I said, it was just 2 days ago, so it was not that long ago. But
And thank you for the emails too.
Mhm.
It's very informative. Thank you.
sorry, Tim, to jump in. You wanna-
It must be
Much to
you,
say.
not me.
Oh, yeah, Nancy said she'd say that to me, so. There's really nothing else to add. Both projects have completed seeker. We'd be adopting a type 1 action that, when we approve the seeker resolution, adopting the town's NEGDEC findings.
And to our knowledge, they have completed all local town approvals as well.
Nancy, can you confirm that? Is there anything pending with the town? Now that you got that letter?
No, nothing is pending. Not with the town. The only thing that's in process is the filing of the subdivision with the county.
Oh,
But
yes,
the
right.
town has approved the special use permit, the site plan application, the subdivision, and the variance.
Okay.
Thanks, Nancy.
Okay, any more questions or comments from the board? Or-
Just to clarify, I mean, that situation she just described in terms of the subdivision approval, that happened on the Richland projects, north and south, if you remember, it was a couple of years ago now, it still hasn't closed, it should close any day now, maybe probably by next week, but that same issue happened, so that's not really a deal breaker or anything that we would have to wait for. It's just a pro forma function of filing the subdivision and getting the new tax parcel IDs, that's all.
Okay, anything else? Okay, I guess we'll act on Valmy PV LLC. The first item is the seeker resolution. Can I get a motion and a
I'll make
second?
that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Tim Stahl, second by Mark Greco on the seeker resolution. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried. Inducement resolution, can I get a motion and a second on the inducement resolution?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Motion by Barry Trimble, seconded by Mark Greco. Any comments or questions on the inducement? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, the pilot resolution, can I get a motion and a second on the pilot resolution?
I'll move it.
Motion by Len Schick, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Barry Trimble. Any questions or comments on the pilot resolution? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And the final approving resolution. Can I get a motion and a second, please? I'll move it.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wasn't even drifted off.
Motion by Gary Toth, seconded by Tim Stahl. Any other comments or questions on the final approving resolution? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now we jump down to Valney 2, PV LLC.
So I don't think there's much more of a overview needed, based on what I already gave, or, first what I already gave. This is a 4.85 megawatts, the pilot payment will be slightly less, it's 5,000 per megawatt. So similarly, it's met all town approvals, and the town has found, or neg deck finding has been made by the town. So very similar. They move through the process together, these two projects. So.
Okay, any comments, questions from the board? Anything from our guests at RIC you'd like to share with us regarding this one project? Okay, hearing none, we'll act on the resolutions for Valney 2 PV LLC. The seeker resolution, can I get a motion and a second on that, please?
I'll move it.
Motion by Mark Greco, seconded by
Second.
Barry Trimble. Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Okay, the inducement resolution, can I get a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Motion by Mark Greco, seconded by Gary Toth on the inducement. Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. The pilot resolution, can I get a motion and a second on the pilot resolution?
I'll move it.
Motion by Len Schick, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Tim Stahl on the pilot resolution. Any comments or questions on the pilot resolution? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The pilot resolution is carried. And the final approving resolution, can I get a motion and a second, please?
I'll make it.
Motion by Tim Stahl, seconded
Second.
by
Second.
Mark Greco. Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The final approving resolution is carried.
Did we lose our?
Is anyone left on the phone from RIC?
Yeah, Chris is still here.
Hey, Chris. So everything's approved, and we'll be following up with the resolutions and so forth for you folks.
Okay, great.
Thanks for
Thank
everything.
you.
Thanks for joining the call. Lynn,
Good.
can you
Thanks a
actually
lot.
have
Take care.
Second for the seeker resolution for that?
For this next one, it was Tim.
For the first
Okay.
one,
For Volney 2.
Valney 2,
Tim.
Barry seconded.
Barry, okay, that's what I thought.
Mark approved.
Yep, I got that. Okay.
Before we move on, can I throw out there that I think we're wasting money by giving them a mortgage tax exemption? I mean, the sales tax thing, I get, but they're not gonna not come because we don't give them a mortgage tax exemption. I mean, is that something that we can consider as a board removing? Because it seems to me like they're gaining some sort of benefit by doing this, right? They're not walking around dropping solar, farms all over, out of the goodness of their heart, right? They're getting a benefit from this, whether it's a tax credit or whatever. I don't think they're not gonna come by giving them a mortgage.
Would that be something we would have to actually change in our solar deviation policy, that we would actually remove that?
I don't
Or
know
is
how
that-
everybody else
Can that be
feels
looked at on a case by case basis?
Yeah, it might, I'd have to look into that, Mark, just to see if, because it is
I think the county.
allowed
I was gonna say, I talked to
under
your
the
county attorney
state
about this.
law, but I don't know if it's, it's discretionary on the part of a local IDA to deny that benefit.
Well, I can see offering it if we need them to come in, or, they're not, they're
Right.
gonna go someplace else if we don't give it to them, but I don't think that's the case with these things. It doesn't seem to be anyway, in my opinion. It seems to be the only thing we're tracking.
Well, is there even a mortgage tax when they're just renting or leasing the space?
Well, a lot of times, well, some do and some don't. I mean, most of them.
Most haven't. RIC seems to be doing mortgage financing, and you can mortgage with a long-term lease. You can take a leasehold mortgage on it, so that's what's happening. I don't know for a fact, but I assume the lending community probably had to get a little comfortable with this idea too. So in the early days, we never saw a request for mortgage recording tax. I mean, of the 21 we've now approved, it's really only a handful that have it, but they've been more recent.
Does any of that mortgage recording tax actually come back to the county, or is that strictly a state tax that we're
Oh,
exempting?
that's a good point. 'Cause
It's a state tax account.
No, I think we get a portion. I think we get a portion now.
No, well,
Right.
the exemption itself is for everything except for funding for
25%.
Centro, basically transportation.
But the part we exempt, Kevin, if not exempted, does it go to the county's coffers or the state's?
Yeah, but it's not gonna benefit the county. I mean, it's not really a
I think
relevant issue then.
The county might receive a
State wants these
a small
projects.
portion of it, but
Right.
the majority
Yeah.
of it.
I talked to the clerk about this. I think there is a small portion that we get, and I do believe as a county,
Collection fee or something? Or,
I don't think it's a lot, but I think it's a percentage.
Okay.
It makes
Good to
sense
know more
get some
about that.
information on this.
Yes, I think so, too.
Giving that away.
If it's insignificant amount, though, it doesn't make sense to bother, but I mean,
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
I'm looking at the pilot as opposed to
Yeah.
the sales tax and the mortgage tax,
Yeah.
we're not really,
Now, the sales tax is
Would the sales
4%.
tax be more impactful?
it would, but none of the stuff is exempt from sales tax.
Yeah, I mean, the sales tax exemption is what you're given more on, because 4% of that goes to the state, 4% comes to the county, and you're exempting all of that. So that's where you're actually losing something to the county, is on
Yeah.
the sales tax.
Right.
The mortgage recording tax
Right.
is
Again, so I
negligible.
don't think these solar farms are gonna look someplace else because we said, oh, you gotta pay for sales tax. I mean, it's just something that we should consider, I mean,
Yeah,
to
it-
benefit the county.
It
and
may
the
push
town.
them further towards that state program, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those where I don't know. I don't know
And I
the
think
calculus on
that's
that.
worth the conversation, because that state, and maybe this isn't the right time for us, we can set
Yeah.
up another time, but I think we should have that discussion, because that state waiver, in my head, just kind of a normal human being, I think, 15 years for free versus 20 years at this amount.
Mhm.
There's a reason every single one has come to us for a 20-year pilot, right?
They have
Usually-
it all though.
Yeah.
What's that?
They have it all in the county.
No, we've only had one that didn't. So, but I'm just saying that there is a benefit here,
Sure.
and clearly
Yeah.
there's a reason why. And I think what it is because they don't want every community to go with the waiver.
Yeah, I think that's something we figure out outside of this, and let's
That's
do
where I'm
some
going.
research
I think
on
we
it.
should
I
talk
think it's a
about
good
that.
point. It's a good point.
But as far as I think the county does oversee because we county attorney had actually reached out to me asking about, at least in our UTEP, we include that information, and we don't have to, at least according to the county attorney. So I think these are conversations we can have. And I don't think our UTEP has been updated in 20 years, so.
Well,
Solar pilot UTEP has been, because that was done in
That's the
April
one.
2020.
The
but
general
but not
they
the-
have
yeah.
gone through that, I know.
So based on the conversation that we just had with these folks, there's limited places in the county where they can put these things, correct?
And and unless the electrical infrastructure is upgraded, it's going to reduce over time, because even the sites that can be used, can't be used if there's no bandwidth in the electrical system.
Some similar to what we're doing.
They have to have the capacity and they have to be near
So,
Have to call Patty and ask
it.
her.
Okay, anything else? You're all set,
I'm
Mike?
all set, yeah. Just laughing at some sarcasm.
No.
It's usually my job.
It's okay, we like a little levity here.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
so
Okay,
moving on, I guess.
huh?
I was just gonna say, we got another one we gotta do.
Oh, you want you want to move right on to the next one?
Yeah, it's up, I mean, if we're ready to.
No.
For
Is there
Tuesday.
something that you wanted to?
No, I'm good.
Okay,
He just wants to move on.
okay.
Getting fidgety from the coffee.
All right, number 7, TDJ Properties LLC.
Do you wanna?
Yeah, I can do that. This is one that, as you remember, this originally came to the IDA back in November for the initial resolution. The company came to the IDA in December to do a presentation. We've held a public hearing for the project back in January. The taxing authorities have all received the deviation notice. Everything's kind of, as we always do, everything's done by the book in terms of making sure everyone has the proper notice. There was no concerns back from the communities on this. The project, as you remember, it's the complete renovation of 1850 County Route 57. It's about 890,000 square foot, over 2 buildings, and
The Miller plant, to
yes,
be clear.
it's the former Miller Brewery Warehouse and Annex building. It's not the ethanol side, but it's the warehouse side, and it's $26,390,000 project. There's a 20-year pilot, which is a UTEP deviation due to the fact that they're looking at a fixed numbers where it's going up over time versus just a UTEP. The project is anticipated to create 45 new full-time jobs and retain 10 jobs. It's going to support a $26.4 million capital investment, and it's really, I look at this facility as a strategic site in the county that's going to help to attract businesses both related to Micron and that supply chain, as well as other advanced manufacturing and distribution logistics projects. So it's an asset that we've had for a long time that we've talked about. Said, hey, if this thing was renovated, it would be great. And now we finally have someone who's going to renovate it. And this is the type of project that I think we really should be supporting. So we held the public hearing on this one back in January 23rd, which those minutes of that were provided. It's also online. I just wanted to quickly, because this is another one that county legislator had made some comments on, I wanted to, this meeting was attended by representatives of the company, as well as legislator Castiglia from District 25, legislator Lockwood from District 11, which is the legislator for this project, as well as David Ferris, who's a local resident to the Volney-Fulton area. We provided a description of the financial assistance of the project. Legislator Lockwood asked if the existing small businesses would be relocated that are currently in the building, which was answered by a representative of the company, that they were currently in negotiations with those companies those leases that they had with those companies are expired and they've been there on a month-to-month basis. So they're working on, and to my knowledge, they're still working on trying to renegotiate those to keep them in place. They use about 200,000 square foot of the over 800,000 square foot of the facility. Mr. Ferris asked a question about the pilot payments, what they would be per year, and the amount of those over the length of the pilot, which was answered. I answered that. He had a follow-up question about. His question was more about if no pilot was done and the property would not be redeveloped. One, how much lost value would there be with a pilot agreement versus not doing anything? And then he also wanted to know if the community would be better off waiting to see what happens after Micron comes to town.
Who is this? I'm sorry.
It's a resident, David Ferris. He's a local resident. I answered both, and then actually, really, the developer, Mike Tormey from TDJ, said, "Listen, the building's in pretty poor shape. This thing has been neglected for over 20 years. If something isn't really done with that soon, we may be looking at some portions of the building needing to be demolished or completely. So I don't think it's a situation where you want to wait on this thing and just kind of let it dilapidate further, to see if something else could happen. And we know what can happen with this. We don't know what could happen if you hold off for years. So Mike Tormey from TDJ also said that this pilot helps them get on their feet until they have fully leased the facility. And as I said as well, I mean, doing this project now helps provide opportunities for partners of Micron. And if all goes well and they expand beyond the footprint of the building they're talking about, the pilot could be renegotiated with higher payments. If they fill this thing up and there's a show of demand to build on more, add more stuff, then hey, they can come back and we can look at doing more and have that conversation at the time. It's a good problem to have. So that answered his questions. Then legislator Castiglia brought up an example of a project that received a pilot agreement, and I didn't mention it here, but the project name was K&N Foods. This was a project in the city of Fulton that did not create the full amount of jobs promised in their application. He hesitates on providing a 20-year pilot and instead proposed a 5-year pilot that could be extended if the original job numbers were created. Mike Tormey, representative of the project, had stated that the initial 5 years is the most critical period, but it would be very difficult for them to plan future phases and attract long-term tenants with a short pilot. Because these pilot fees, these are not to be paid by the developer over time. These are to be paid directly by the tenants. So the benefit is going to be given to the tenants.
Just to clarify, the developer will be accountable for paying us.
Correct.
It's triple net leases,
Correct.
so they'll collect like any triple net lease.
But the benefits being provided to the tenants, and by if you're trying to sign 10-year tenants or longer and only have a 5-year or less pilot, you know, that's a very difficult thing to do. So, and I also brought up to Mr. Castiglia that the example pilot that he brought up was actually renegotiated shortly after when K&N Foods sold off a piece of the real estate to iFreeze, which then created more jobs and an additional pilot payment more than the original with K&N Foods. So it's sort of half the story, didn't tell the whole thing. So wanted to make sure that that was on the record. Legislator Castiglia asked if the company would be using the city of Fulton for sewer service, which Mr. Mike Tormey answered that yes, the city would be providing sewer service. I provided the same presentations that were provided here to the IDA to the people who were in attendance at that public hearing. And Legislator Castiglia again then continued to propose for a shorter pilot, which could be extended. He then said, well, maybe 7 years. I said to make it known to everyone in attendance that the IDA board would be made aware of his proposal via minutes and video before they vote at the February meeting or later. And I also said that because this meeting was right before the January, that we were not going to be voting on it at the January meeting because not enough notice had been given for a deviation for the taxing authority. So that's why we had to push that to this meeting. So Mr. Castiglia then stated that he did not want to be seen as critical of the company. He just has a hesitation for a 20-year pilot due to some previous projects. He is welcoming to the company, but wants to protect the best interests of the taxing authorities. Just wanted to have that on record. And that was the end of that public hearing. It was about 40 minutes. It started at 10 o'clock and ended at 10:48 a.m. So that's just to give an accounting. Like I said, I wanted to make sure because there was comments from a county legislator that you guys had a full counting and aware of the minutes and comments made.
We appreciate that, thank
Yep. So like I said, it's a 48-minute video. I wanted to boil it down to about 3 minutes. But so there was no, and I also want to state that don't have it in here, so you got to take my word for it. But that Legislator Lockwood was very supportive of the project and is very happy to see that building is being redeveloped. She's happy with the plan. She has no issues with the pilot agreement being proposed, and is excited to see the businesses that are going to be generated from this.
If I could, I spoke with her last night. She was intended to be here to support it, but with the weather conditions, she was not able to be here. But she did pass that on as well.
Mm-hmm. And as was discussed before, I am making a point to reach out to all county legislators prior to public hearings and to notify them that hey, the IDA is working on projects. That may be why we have a little uptick in the attendance at these public hearings. So maybe it's a little bit of a unintended consequence, but it's good to be transparent.
We're also gaining legislative support, Austin.
Good. Well,
I can let you know that.
That's part of the other portion of that.
As far as if I could jump in terms of waiting, for something else. I mean, this property, for those of us who've been around long enough, has been looked at some serious tire kicking and projects, and the paper plant comes to mind most significantly, where we actually had the owner of the company come down and meet with us, and that was an experience in itself. But I mean, this thing has been looked at time and time again, and many of us have toured it, and it's right. If something doesn't happen soon, it's going to be just a scrap heap.
Yeah.
So
I
the
think
fact that this family's coming in and going to drop 25 million.
Yeah, I think, no, the
That's
point is,
significant.
well, you can't let this go any longer. I mean, it's been too late now. I mean,
Yep.
you gotta sink this kind of money into it because of the deterioration and everything that's going on. I mean, it's only gonna get worse.
Sure, if they can turn this site into what they did for the site next door,
Yeah.
the way it looks, it will be.
It's going to be the best marketing piece they have because they can, instead of showing them a dilapidated facility, they bring them in and said, this one used to look like that, and this is what that's going to look like. So it's great.
So they're not asking for any financial assistance from us, huh?
Well,
For this project they are, not for the Roselli building at all.
Not funding, the financial assistance in the way of exemptions.
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
it.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, there's no they've not asked us to date for any direct financing for the project.
when the roof is $10 million, our little money doesn't make
Yeah.
much of a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the tenants that they might attract would be a target more than this development.
Maybe we can finance the bathroom and they can put the IDA bathroom sign over it,
The other thing about this site, it has no water, it has no gas, and it has underpowered electric because of what Addis has screwed up for all of it. I mean, the water comes through Addis, so they're now in the process of getting a separate connection from us. So this isn't like a ready to move industrial site. It may be our most strategic location, but these people have taken on this bought this site with all these shortfalls, including the condition of the building. I mean, they're working on it now, but they may need to put in a substation. That there's a lot to support tenants.
Where did
There's
the
a
people
lot to
on
do.
Leland Radiator go, weren't they?
We
had
had to come up with
approved-
the financing.
We had
That was-
approved a pilot for
Yeah.
them, as you recall, but
it was a bank. It was a financing issue. Really, I mean, the banks looked at it and said that's going to be a tough thing to do. And that was a smaller project. It was like 13 million. These guys are doing double that. It's a $25 million project. These guys have the wherewithal. They can do it.
Oh, they.
If I could speak to Legislator Castiglia's concern, I think it's a valid concern. I understand where he's coming from. I think that, and I had a good conversation with him after that actually too. And I know Austin, you spoke with him as well. But it's a fair question, and we do kind of oversee a very important piece of the public here, right? We understand that we're giving away benefits, and so we do need to have an accountability structure. And that was my conversation with him. Is listen, if you're going to give a 5-year pilot with a possibility we'll extend it, no one's going to come in and drop $25 million, right? So the idea would be, instead of that, we say, hey, you've got this pilot, but you do need to satisfy the accountability. You do need to show us you're doing it. And he might highlight one where potentially there's been some concerns, but we've had two just in the time I've been here that we have held accountable. They did not satisfy the requirements, and we severed those pilots. So I think that, I won't speak to that other one. I don't know much about the other one, but at least in the last couple of years that I've been here, we've been keeping an eye on these things. And I think it's better, and that's what I said, I think it's better to give them the 20 with the understanding there's an accountability structure. You'll need to do what you said, but we're gonna keep that. But we're gonna encourage you and give you everything you need to be successful.
And there's an entire auditing and an administrative process that every year we make sure projects are creating the jobs that they say they're going to create, and that we have clawback provisions in our pilot agreements if they do not perform, that we can claw back benefits. So that already exists. It's not like it's something that we can't do, and we've shown before if someone doesn't perform, we can end the pilot, and the proper entities can go after them for non-payment. So it's not, it's sort of, to me, it's being a little, it's kind of fixing an issue that doesn't necessarily exist. And I guess out of 73 pilots, if you can point to one of them where the jobs weren't made, like I said, we actually renegotiated that pilot, brought in a company to take a portion of that property and right sized the project in a way. So it was already addressed.
Any other comments or questions on TGJ properties?
when we get to the secret resolution, Gary, I have some comments, but we can wait till then.
Do we have the pilot, what's the pilot payment on here? Is that listed?
Yeah, it's on here, 182,000
You wanna
average.
describe that?
Yeah, it's so the way that is going to work is, and I don't have. Let me see this here.
Are you talking about the 20-year breakdown?
Well, I'm just wondering, when we give these pilots out, we obviously have a formula, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah, so for this one, this was worked out with the company. This is a deviation from our normal pilot agreement. The first 5 years of this is going to be the most critical. So we had worked a deal, and this is really, the numbers are very close to what the numbers would be under a UTEP. However, what they asked for is they said there's a lot of volatility if the assessed value goes way up or goes way down. You know, you can give us these numbers, but they don't mean anything if the assessed value is different than what you did. So we said, okay, we're going to use numbers very similar to what would be under a UTEP, but we're just going to fix them and say, based on this, we're going to fix these numbers. So the first 5 years would be $125,000, which is actually more than what was paid in 21, I think, or 22. I think in 22 it was like 109,000 or something like that. Then in the years 6 through 10, it would be 165,000. Then it would be 100, and then it goes up, by 10% or every 2 years after that. So it follows what our UTEP would be for manufacturing. It's just we did it as a deviation because the company has a good point. They're putting $25 million into this thing. What's to say the assessor isn't going to come back and say it's worth $25 million, and then whatever estimates we give them based on a UTEP are blown out of the water. So
The other thing I think it's important to note that's happened is, in my mind, the project started when they bought the building, and after purchasing the building this past year, the assessment increased from 2.8 million to 4.2 million for the train wreck of the building we just described. no water, no gas, not enough electric, and a building that's falling down. It went up from 2.8 to 4.2. It's been at 2.8 for quite some time. So really, when we've been analyzing this pilot, we're not necessarily comparing to current assessment. We're looking. A lot of people would come to us before they ever close on the property. In this case, they jumped on it and bought it for $5 million as is. But so in our mind, the base assessment is the 2.8 million plus, or which is about 110,000 of tax.
When they came to us in 2022, the assessed value was $2.8 million in the
Yeah,
project.
But
So
they paid $5 million for it.
they paid $5 million for it. Yeah. Well,
Well, I can understand.
Assessed value
I can
and-
understand the assessed
yeah,
jumping up on that.
yeah, assessed value
I know.
and
Potential value and what it's
Yeah.
actually worth, right? I
it's,
get
they're
it.
not
I
always
understand.
connected for sure.
Understood.
But you know, and I
Not really
think
clear
that
how that works though, because it seems like the assessments are kind of all over the place, right?
from town to town and from
Yeah.
property to
Percentages
property.
and
Yeah.
And you made mention about the county being a tax authority. We have no control over assessments.
No,
we
you
just
do
get
not.
whatever.
It's just it's local control.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. That is a great point, and we know that from other projects.
And actually, that's something we need to, I don't know if now's the right time to talk about it, but we do need to have a conversation as the idea. I don't know, Kevin, if you've got the ability to look into this, but my understanding in the other project you're talking about, do we have the authority as the IDA? And once we've signed on for a pilot, our name is on the property. Do we have the authority to challenge
On behalf of a
on
company,
behalf of
We're not-
property?
Our name shows up online, but we're not really.
It's a
we're
leasehold
not the
interest.
owner of the
That's what I'm
property.
wondering. Do we
So
have the authority?
The company has the authority.
Right.
that's spelled out in the pilot agreement
Right.
too.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was
Yeah.
wondering.
So here's the conundrum, and I guess I'm going to pose this question from a county standpoint, right? It's you have a pilot in place. They default. Let's take the Addis,
Mhm.
for example, right? The assessor goes in and says, it's on fire, it's falling apart, it's freezing, it's worth 26 million. The county is now on the hook to the schools and the towns to make them whole. We might not ever get that money back at a tax sale. In this case, it might work out, but the potential for the county losing based on somebody else's over-exaggerated assessment,
right?
it's complicated. So we're wondering if there's a way legally to prevent that from happening. I mean, just to be realistic, the county can't go, we can't go and grieve the assessment, even though.
Yeah, I guess it would have to be, and this is just from my perspective, and I'm not a lawyer, is that
That's what I was looking at.
whoever pays the taxes whoever pays the taxes has the ability to challenge the assessment.
Yeah, I mean, it the reason that we terminated the pilot was because
They
we
weren't
weren't getting paid,
Sure.
right? So once that pilot is terminated, we're out legally. We have no authority to do anything. Even if we had the authority to challenge the taxes previously, we wouldn't because we're out. It's really incumbent upon the property owner at that point. I mean, Addis, frankly, should have said,
Right.
"Whoa,
Yeah,
wait a
it's a
minute,
unique case in this, but
we need to file for grieve our assessment because we're overpaying."
Yeah, it's not really a challenge. It's not a problem if they're in good standing, right? I mean,
Right.
But
We
the
wouldn't
problem is-
challenge it if
I-
they were
I-
still.
Right.
I would just
actively
ask that for further conversation on that, we hold it to executive session and try to
involved. That's a great idea.
knock through these, because I think that there's some more conversation to be had there, and and we have a bullet in executive session, we can do
Yeah,
that.
makes sense.
Very good.
Okay, anything else, any comments, questions on TDJ properties? Okay, I guess we'll go through the resolutions. The seeker resolution, can I get a motion and a second on the seeker?
I'll make it.
Second.
Motion by Tim Stahl, seconded by Mark Greco.
Gary, I have some comments on that, on the resolution before
Okay,
the
any-
secret resolution.
Any comments or questions?
We, as discussed in past meetings, we have acted as lead agency for this project because at the moment, the only thing the company needs from the town is a building permit, so that's not an action that would require seeker review. Ours is, so we've done, Kevin has taken care of the 30-day notice some time ago now. It's a full EAF because it's a type 1 action, because of the square footage on the roof actually triggers the larger review. We haven't required any particular environmental review because it's more or less a consistent use to the past use of the property. So we, as the lead agency, haven't required like a wildlife review or a site assessment, I guess would be called. So we've been through the full EAF, as has Barclay Damon, and basically there's no significant impact. I mean, obviously its impacts were noted on traffic and wastewater production, I mean, if you take an unoccupied building and then start using it, there will be some traffic and, water use and those
Yeah,
types of
it-
things,
it's-
garbage production.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd one, but for the size, and it's a massive building, right?
Yeah.
But for that size, it would otherwise be a type 2 action, meaning no environmental review is needed. So if you have a square footage of 4,000, 400,000 or less, no, it's for renovation of an existing building with a square footage of 4,000. Isn't it?
It seems awfully low. It might be 100,000.
It's
some hundred.
In any event,
Square footage triggers it.
the square footage triggers it, but it's literally a renovation
Right.
of a big building.
No new ground be broken.
If it were under the square footage required by seeker, it would 40,000. That's what it is. It would be a type 2 action, meaning no environmental review is needed.
Yeah.
So truly, this would be a negative declaration.
Yeah, that's so I'm
No impact.
certainly, Kevin and I and Barclay Dam are recommending the board find a neg deck.
And by adopting the resolution, you would be doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Understood.
So that's all I had, Gary, on that.
Okay, any more comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, the inducement resolution, can I get a motion and a second on the inducement resolution, please?
I'll move it. I'll second.
Motion by Barry Trimble, seconded by Mark Greco. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. The pilot resolution, can I get a motion and a second on the pilot resolution?
I'll move it.
Motion by Len Schick, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mark Greco. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Pilot is carried. And the final approving resolution, can I get a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
This motion by Mark Greco, seconded by
Second.
Barry Trimble. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Final approving resolution is carried. Okay, number 8, Fulton Thermal Corporation.
Okay, I can do this. So Fulton Thermal approached the IDA back in January, I believe it was, to their bank, their financing has requested, just as interest rates have kind of have gone up, their financing has requested them to change the way that they index their interest rate from LIBOR to SOFR, and so we've talked to our legal counsel at Barclay Damon about it, and they said, hey, it's a resolution needs to be done. It doesn't change anything really. It doesn't change anything we need to do. So they have indicated to us, they've drawn up the resolution and recommended that we pass a resolution to modify, allow their financing to modify the interest rate index from LIBOR to SOFR. It's a
What is SOFR?
I was gonna ask the same question.
good question. It's a different method to determining I think it's a daily interest rate. I don't know, Kevin, if you know more.
LIBOR.
Yeah, I do.
LIBOR is European.
Yeah, but there are two. LIBOR for a long time was used as a global standard, but LIBOR is set based on the bank's opinions. These certain banks that are part of this group, their opinions of what the future rates will be. It's not actually based on anything actual. And if you follow this stuff, you might recall a pretty serious case where those rates were being manipulated some years back. So the global, and in the U.S. sort of agency that's tied in with the Fed and the Treasury, they've recommended moving away from LIBOR. In fact, some LIBOR rates and non-US dollar denominated LIBOR rates are not even being published anymore. So by the end of 2023, it's basically going to be phased out. The banks won't be required. The banks that are submitting their anticipation of future rates to this index won't be doing that. They won't be required to do that anymore. So it's basically being phased out industry wide. So anyway, that's
Secure
Like SOFR,
overnight
SOFR?
financing.
Secured overnight financing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so
And
it's an overnight.
It's based on the overnight Fed rate that the banks pay. Where
Sweep rate.
And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
and I should have said this to begin with, but back in, I think it was 2013, the IDA had issued tax exempt bonds for Fulton Thermal, and so this is related to those bonds in 2010. So this is related to those bonds that were issued in 2010. It's not anything new. We're just allowing them for the bonds that have already been issued to change their interest rate index.
There was also the IDA's been not named as a party, but has been subpoenaed by a much larger and complex litigation taking place related to the LIBOR manipulation. So we've actually had to supply documentation to the parties in the litigation, just, for their use. We're not involved in it in any way. We were just kind of almost like a witness because we did a couple of these deals and we had to turn over everything. So.
This is our only, of the bonds in the IDA's portfolio, this is only industrial revenue bond, the rest are civic facility bonds, this is the only one tied to LIBOR, so this is probably the only request we get.
So we have to,
We
we
just
have to
do,
do,
make a motion.
make a
So
motion.
there's a
to go to-
resolution to basically, for this board to approve this modification of the interest rate index on that existing bond, and then Barclay Damon will take care of the necessary documentation on our behalf. Fulton Thermal will pay the bill to basically execute this and modify the bond documents. And they've already prepared those documents for Fulton for their review.
They said it's
Okay,
pretty
so-
standard. They've done this for plenty
Yeah,
of
Barclay Damon has done this with other projects. Yeah.
So can I get a motion and a second for the modification of interest rates, please?
Move.
Motion by
Second.
Len Schick, seconded by Barry Trimble. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, the modification is carried. Number 9, reappointment of IDA members.
So, just to make everyone aware, all of the IDA members were reappointed last month, back in January by the county, and everything was filed with the state as needed. We had to do a little bit of running around at the end of the month, but I think we got it all figured out. And if it's something they decide they want to do on a yearly basis, I think we got a system now to to do it. But it does create a lot of work, especially I know that over at the county that Betsy did a lot of running around, and I told her I really appreciated that. I mean, she even ran down and got signatures down in Fulton from Len, and she, they went above and beyond for us to do that. But just want to make everyone aware it's all been done at the county level and at the state level. So,
I talked with her and she said that the card I signed said it was indefinite as opposed to a
It's
yearly.
at their discretion, she said.
So I'm curious, if it's gonna be done every year, I think they need to reassess not having everybody once a year, I mean, if you wanna do terms or something like that, do terms, but, to all of a sudden,
it
have
creates
this
a burden
board
for the
to-
county because the county is the one who actually runs around and has to
Yeah,
chase stuff
from my
down.
understanding, because the legislation, the governing legislation says that this board serves at the pleasure, there's not any sort of a term. Essentially, all they're doing
Lifetime, this will
is, every single one of us is lifetime, but they're just re-upping at the beginning of at least last year. I don't know if it's going to be an annual occurrence, that we were a little
Yeah.
surprised at that to begin
I-
with, so.
Was surprised as you guys.
I think with the language that they did at reappointing, they had to do it this way. If they were to change the language and say that they are confirming or whatever, if they change the language so they don't have to go through the whole rigmarole again, that might be better. But I think the way that they worded it, they had to go through it again.
That's a Rich Mitchell question.
Yeah, so we've had some conversations internally, we'll see if.
Okay.
And if it is done again next year, we'll obviously have a heads up and be prepared to.
Know what has to go into it, yeah.
So, I think there was a little bit of confusion with that.
For information for the board, Barclay Damon represents a lot of IDAs around New York State, and although a little bit different than the Fulton Thermal Bond, where this is the only one we're going to do. We're the only county that has chosen to do this in their experience ever. So,
And it's the first time in my legal representation of the IDA, which goes back 20 plus years, that the legislature has ever done this. It's always, once you're appointed until your successor takes over, which is exactly what the enabling legislation says. So, it doesn't mean that the appointing authority can't do it, but it just, for what happened, it was a fire drill that, was unfortunate because maybe the intention was well-meaning, but the execution of it was extremely poor, in my opinion.
Well, if,
Being on the board the longest, I guess my question is, the county legislature has the right to unappoint and to appoint. And to reaffirm us every year seems kind of overkill, just my opinion, when you still have the authority to do a resolution to take somebody off the board and a resolution to put somebody on the board. I mean, that is still part of it, because we serve at the pleasure of the county.
In hindsight, I may have prompted all this unknowingly. I did go and grab the folders of all the committees that the legislature is required to have and created, and I went through them with Betsy to make sure that they were updated, because we have people on there that are retired, that have died, that no longer exist. Since the pandemic hit, a lot of the committees haven't met. We haven't heard from them. And in my new position, I said, okay, let's look into this. Let's either, if we can get rid of the committee, if we haven't used them, let's get rid of them. If we need to update them, let's get them updated, and let's reappoint the people so that they're accurate and, meet whatever standards have to be met. And let's have them report to us so that we know that they're actually meeting and doing something, right? So that may have somehow prompted this whole thing through somebody else. I did not address the IDA, but all the other committees I was looking at, and I said, hey, let's get this updated.
So you were just looking at every committee,
Every
county,
committee,
and
every
you just
committee.
fell into it, and
That's possible.
yeah, that's
I
no problem.
don't know if that's the case, but now in hindsight, looking back, I may have created this catalyst.
If it's done again next year, we'll know, and we'll know right after the organizational meeting to pay a little more, to know to look for these resolutions and whatnot, and
Yeah.
we didn't. It was
If we
3
knew
weeks
we would have
after
had
that
the cards
meeting,
here
I
ready to
jumped on
sign
this.
at the January meeting, we would have done things so that would have been smoother, but
Yeah.
we didn't know what we were getting
It's not a
ourselves
reflection
into.
on this board.
If you recall, at the January meeting, we had this discussion and it was an open question. So when I looked into it, it was a couple of days after the meeting and,
That may have prompted it too, I don't know.
Well,
I want to take
well-
full responsibility for this.
no, this happened after the fact, right? No, there was, I think the rumor was that the board was all reappointed at the organizational meeting. And then once I got a hold of the meeting minutes and I read them, I said, holy cow, we were. But when that happens, it also triggers a requirement under the public officers law to sign an oath of office card. And if you don't do it within 30 days after your appointment, it's an absolute fatal flaw. Your appointment is void. By operation of law, you have to start again. And I called up Rich Mitchell to confirm that. He's like, yeah, well, there's no problem. We could just reappoint everybody at that February meeting. I said, I don't want, that's terrible. That makes the county, everybody look bad. We'll try to get it done.
I withdraw my confession. It's his
All
fault.
It's
right,
always the lawyer's.
it's on
fault.
record.
Just a question, is there a way of reaffirming and not reappointing? Just so the members know who's on the board.
We have
and,
9 months to
We've
figure
got,
that
that's
out.
right, we've got a long time to figure that out, and, I don't think it's an issue either way, honestly. It's not a reflection of this board in any way.
Yep.
It's not gonna change.
So I guess at this point, there's nothing really, that was just an update and just wanted to let you know, there's no harm, no foul on it. We got it done, just knowing for future if there's, how much it did do stuff, if that is something to be done going forward. If not, then great. But I think we're moving into, I think we've got everything on the,
And thank
We got
Betsy
that.
for everything she did, because she,
She's terrific.
numerous phone calls.
Yeah.
Oh,
She did a
yeah.
good job.
She does a great job.
she's awesome.
Okay,
Where are we?
no, executive session. Okay, can I get a motion in a second to go into executive session, please?
So did we finish 8? Did we vote on that? Did we
We
have
did.
to vote on? Okay. Yeah, I'll make the motion to move into executive session.
Okay, motion by Mark Greco, do I have a second?
It's 10:57.
Motion by Mark Greco, seconded by Barry Trimble at what time?
10:57.
10:57. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Well, before we go into executive session, Kevin, will you please detail the reasons for going into executive session before I forget?
Sure, just to talk about the financial circumstances of a particular individual or corporation.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, and at 10:57, we are into executive session.
Morgan called me. Bob Morgan called me.
All right, we're ready.
Okay, motion to come out of executive session, please.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mark Greco, seconded by Tim Stahl, at what time?
12:05.
12:05. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, we have a few agenda items that were discussed that we need to take action on. First is the County of Oswego IDA Administrative Agreement with Operation Oswego County. This is a 2-year agreement, and Kevin, you wanna help me with the language you thought we should include in that?
Sure. Have one, I guess I would just say that it would be an approval to approve the proposed administrative service contract as proposed for a 2-year period ending 2024.
But also, in addition,
Oh,
bring
yeah,
the,
you're right.
rather than outsourcing the monthly accounting services to a third party, have Operations Oswego County do that on behalf of the IDA on a monthly basis.
Okay. All right,
I'll move it.
okay, with motion, do I have a motion by Lenchik, do I have a second? Motion, or second by Mark Greco. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next is the delinquent loan report. Can I get a motion
I'll
to
make that
accept it?
motion.
Motion by Tim Stahl. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, Mark Greco. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. I guess the next order of business is schedule our next meeting.
We need to do a delinquent loan report approval?
We just
Just,
did.
You
just,
just did that? Okay, I thought it was just part of the EDF. Next meeting, I am going to be out of the office I think it's the very last week of March. I think it's like the 28th through the, I don't have my calendar. in front
yeah,
of me.
week of the 27th.
Week of the 27th, so if we could do it the week before that, later in that week, so it'd be like the 24th or something.
Thursday, the 23rd, maybe.
I'm good for that.
I'm
Well,
wide
OC
open.
has a board meeting on the Monday, so we need a little
I'm
time
good for
after
Thursday.
that, before this. So
Thursday the 23rd.
Thursday's good.
Kevin, you good with that?
9 a.m.
9 a.m.? Is that good for everybody?
Works for me.
Okay, so Thursday, March 23rd at 9 a.m.
Yes.
9 a.m. Okay, is there any other business to bring to the board? Okay, motion to adjourn? Motion by Mark Greco, seconded by Gary Toth. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Great. And
With
the
the
time-
four of us here, if I voted no, we could never leave.
Please don't do that.
Let it come across the table.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it is on. Sorry, no, Kevin, it's not. Just a moment.
Good call.
Lost track of it.
Very.
Do you hear the hot mic there?
Yeah.
Yeah.